There comes a point where understanding no longer wants to move. Not because everything is known, but because nothing is asking anymore. This episode is about that point. Not as an arrival, not as a conclusion, but as a settling. Earlier in this process, understanding felt important, necessary. You wanted to know what was happening, why things felt different, why old patterns were showing up, why awareness didn't fix everything. Understanding gave orientation. It helped you stay, but understanding was never the destination. It was a bridge, and bridges are meant to be crossed, not lived on. As awareness matures, something quiet begins to happen. Questions lose urgency, not because they're answered, but because they no longer matter in the same way. You may still wonder about things, but the wondering doesn't pull. This is often where people feel confused. They think something has stalled, that growth has stopped, that curiosity has faded. But what's actually happening is that understanding is integrating. Understanding, when it's complete, doesn't feel sharp. It feels ordinary. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It simply becomes how life is lived. Earlier, understanding was active. You were piecing things together, making sense of experience, seeing patterns. That activity served its purpose. But eventually, continued effort begins to interfere. Letting understanding settle means allowing insight to stop moving, to stop being applied, to stop being referenced. This can feel unsettling at first, because effort had become familiar. You may notice that you no longer reach for explanations when something arises. You feel something, and that's enough. You notice a reaction, and it resolves on its own. Understanding is present, but it's not being consulted. This is not indifference. It's trust. Understanding often wants to do something. To improve experience, to refine behavior, to maintain clarity. But awareness doesn't require maintenance, and understanding doesn't need a job. One sign that understanding is settling is a reduction in commentary. Less internal explanation, less mental narration, less checking if things make sense. Life happens, and you move with it. Another sign is that you stop comparing your experience to descriptions, to teachings, to previous states. You're no longer measuring yourself against an internal standard. You're simply living. This can feel anticlimactic, especially if you expected some final realization, some lasting clarity, some permanent state. But what arrives instead is something quieter. You may notice that awareness feels very ordinary now. Not special, not elevated, just present. This ordinariness is often mistaken for loss, but it's actually integration. Awareness was never meant to stand apart from life. It was meant to dissolve into it. Letting understanding settle also means letting go of needing to explain your experience. To yourself, to others. Words feel less necessary, not because you're avoiding expression, but because experience no longer needs translation. You may still talk about awareness, but it won't feel urgent. It won't feel like you're trying to get somewhere. It will feel like describing something that's already obvious to you. This is also where seeking thins out, not through decision, but through irrelevance. You don't stop seeking. Seeking stops making sense. There may still be curiosity, but it's lighter, less directional, less hungry. It doesn't demand resolution. Letting understanding settle doesn't mean disengaging from life. It means engaging without commentary. You act, you respond, you adjust, but you're not narrating what it means about you. Mistakes still happen. Emotions still arise. Patterns still appear, but they're not analyzed. They're lived. And lived experience resolves itself more cleanly than interpreted experience ever did. Another subtle shift is how silence feels. Earlier, silence felt meaningful. Now it's just silence. Not special, not profound, just space. This is often when people realize they don't think about awareness much anymore. And that realization can feel strange. But awareness isn't something you think about to keep. It's what remains when thinking quiets down. Letting understanding settle also brings humility. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The recognition that nothing needed to be figured out to begin with. Understanding was helpful, but it was never in charge. This doesn't invalidate learning. It completes it. One of the clearest signs that understanding has settled is that you stop trying to integrate. Integration happens on its own when effort falls away. You don't need to align anything. Life aligns itself. This stage doesn't feel like progress. It feels like normalcy, and that can be disorienting if you expected something else. But normalcy is not unconsciousness. It's clarity without tension. You're no longer standing outside life, trying to understand it. You're inside it, moving, responding, living. Season 2 ends here not because something has been achieved, but because nothing else needs explanation. Understanding has done its work. What comes next isn't another phase to master. It's life continuing without the need for orientation. Awareness doesn't need to be foreground. Understanding doesn't need to lead. They can rest. You may notice that the desire to listen to content like this changes after this point. That's natural, not because it wasn't useful, but because it's no longer needed in the same way. Let that be okay. Nothing is being lost. Letting understanding settle isn't about holding on to peace. Peace comes and goes. It's about no longer interfering with experience. If things feel simpler now, less dramatic, less charged, that's not a sign of disengagement. It's a sign of trust. You don't need to remember anything from this episode. You don't need to hold on to language. You don't need to arrive anywhere. Just notice how little effort is required now to live. Season 2 doesn't close with a conclusion. It closes with permission. Permission to stop seeking clarity. Permission to let understanding rest. Permission to live without referencing the process. Nothing more needs to be said. If you've been walking with this season, you don't need to keep anything from it. But if you'd like to stay connected, you're welcome to. Liking the video helps it reach others who may be ready to let things settle too. And if you choose to subscribe, it doesn't mean keeping up. It simply leaves the door open for whatever comes next. And if someone you know has been searching for clarity and feels tired of searching, you're welcome to share this with them. Only if it feels right. Sometimes the most helpful thing is knowing that nothing more is required.